My name is David Robinson. I teach economics at Laurentian University, written a couple books, get in the newspaper from time to time. Current project is poetry, actually. I was interested in economic development in BC, which is a resource economy. And when I came here, I was struck by the fact that there was so little in the economics department or in the university where people were actually paying attention to Northern Ontario as a resource economy. And there was a kind of accident, and that is when Denison decided to shut down their mine at Elliott Lake. I thought, my gosh, we really have to track what happens to the people who are laid off. And so I started a project that ran for 8 years. We did 6 or 8 rounds of interviews with over 1,000 people and saw what happened when a resource town shuts down its main resource industry. And that made me a kind of local expert on the resource economy, quite accidentally. One result of that was that someone asked me to talk about the economy of Sudbury. And when I said it was doing really badly by all of these standard measures and got asked to say something again, that's when I started noticing first the mining cluster. We have this enormous integrated operation. We've got government offices, we've got research offices at the university. And I was really shocked that nobody had put that together and said, hey, this is what they call a cluster in the economic literature. And I did ask some people in the provincial government who were supposed to be in charge of economic development, and they said, no, there's no cluster there. And then a guy who's really well known here, Paul Reed, said to me, hey, David, wake up. You're missing something really important. There's all these small companies that are producing for the mining sector and the forestry sector. And when I saw that, I started arguing that we had a mining supply cluster here that was really important. Now, you may remember that there was a lot of talk about transitioning away from mining, but what had really happened, if you looked at the economy more carefully, is the city was actually diversifying around mining. It was easy to see the university had grown, that the tax center had come in, but the driver of the economy was increasingly these firms. And when I said that, a lot of people got mad at me. Well, the first one was that we found 150 companies that were supplying mining. Another one is that they were exporting half of their product out of Sudbury. And that means that they were bringing lots of money in. A third one was that, and Paul Reed said this, you know, these guys are too busy making money to get organized. And part of the reason why the federal government and the provincial government didn't recognize what was here is because there was no organization, there was no magazine, there was all the things that they would use to recognize an industrial cluster. My picture of it is that the bureaucrats didn't have someone to talk to. If you're a bureaucrat, you want to come in and ask somebody who's in charge of this sector, the organization head or the journalists who know about it. Well, that hadn't happened. These companies had grown up from the grassroots and had become really the most significant part of the economy without anyone noticing. Dick DeStefano, I phoned him and said, Dick, we need an organization. Could you get 10 guys and fake it for a year so they'll believe that there is a cluster here? And Dick did that. And as you know, the magazine is still going and Dick's organization is still going, and people now accept that we have the third largest mining supply region in Canada. You export what you have a surplus of. We have lots of wood. We have very little capacity to add value. The obvious answer, partial answer to that was, well, you've got to have more design capacity and craft capacity. And so I suggested that we needed an industrial design school in Northern Ontario to work with wood. And that seemed like a great idea, but it was really going nowhere until my daughter suggested, well, maybe we could get a school of architecture. But something like a school of architecture brings in a lot of provincial money. So it's an economic development strategy as well for the city as well as for the region as a whole. And it turned out a lot of people really liked that idea. And so my friend Derek Wilkinson put together a steering committee, and that committee worked so well that within a year we had the city council committing $10 million to the project. Well, we made the decision the school was going to be downtown before we told other people. My daughter and I made that decision. It was an urban planning decision we weren't entitled to make, and we made it. And when we started trying to sell the idea of the school, it was really relatively easy to convince people that adding 300 students and another 40 faculty members and technical people and so on would bring back to life much of this area. And it's true, people downtown wanted that. Downtown organizations were excited about it. Some members of council were excited about it. There had not been anything resembling a solution suggested to the crumbling of the downtown. And the architecture school seemed to satisfy that need.
Fellow. He's from Sudbury too, but he lives out in Seattle.
Yeah,
so is
he on the board?
He's on the
If you go back to the 50s and 60s and early 70s, this was very much a community of immigrants. And when I arrived here, you would still hear stories about the Italian boys beating up the French boys for trying to date their sisters. It was a tremendously divided but tremendously energetic community in lots of ways. Strikes, dramatic stories. And then in the 70s, it stopped. So you had this period of really rapid growth, very ambitious ideas. We'll get a university, we'll get an art gallery, we'll get a symphony, we'll get everything. We're going to be a big, sophisticated city. And then in 75, basically it stops. Growth stops, everything stops. The tensions within the community start to decline. It starts to become a place where people have lived here a long time. They're not all newcomers. The union battles decline in importance. It becomes a more middle-class community with universities and other operations. Look at the Bridge of Nations, for gosh sake. This city is proud of having somebody from every country in the world here now. You've gone from being essentially a one-industry town to a more integrated community. As the mining employment drops, different kind of industrial development arises. You get the university is now one of the major revenue sources for the city. Well, I did run for the Green Party 3 times, and I ran for the Green Party 3 times because I'm terrified about where the world's going. The biggest issue that we face right now is climate change. Our politicians have largely failed, and the scientists all around the world are really clear. We need to do 4 times as much to bloody well survive. And so I thought the Green Party was a way to make that point in public. And that's what I'm doing. I'm going to publish a book of poetry. That's my next sort of private project. And I'm working on a couple of academic projects. One of them is trying to figure out how public opinion is formed. And my daughter, who is a systems design engineer, is writing the programs for a model that will let us look at if you introduce ideas more widely or less widely, if there are people who are paying thugs to lie, what does that do to getting something like a climate change decision through? So we're trying to model that formally. And that's lots of fun.